All right, everybody, welcome back to episode 6 of the Metal and Forge podcast, a weekly podcast discussing manhood, entrepreneurship, American life, and matters of the soul. We welcome you to join along with us and stay in touch with us or shoot us some feedback, questions, topic ideas, etc. at mettleandforge.com. Our resident tech guy spun up this great contact form in a matter of hours after we press go on this podcast. Metal is METTLE, mettleandforge.com. Our resident tech guy is Patrick Miller, who's on the panel today. We have Austin Lapp, and I'm Kent Lapp. I'm going to be moderating today. Let's do just a brief round the horn catch up, guys. What's going on in your life? Anything of note? A couple weeks ago, I hit that 40 and went and spent 2 nights at Gaylord Opryland Hotel and Convention Center here in Nashville with the missus. No kids. It was freaking fantastic. And if you haven't ever been to that place, if you're in Nashville and want to kill a couple hours during the day, it's 5 minutes from the airport. It's on that side of town, and it's a giant hotel and convention center all in one that has 3 atriums with gardens, and inside one of the atriums is like a small village inside the atrium, inside the hotel, inside the convention center. I don't know how many restaurants are in that hotel, but it's a bunch. You know, the restaurants are not going to be the best in the city, but they're fine. And the steakhouse is like a house all of its own with waterfalls overlooking the village. The place is really cool. There's over 6,000 tropical plants in there from over 200 species. So we had a fantastic time. And it's one of those things where when you live someplace you never play tourist in your own backyard, really. So that was only the second time we'd spent time there. The first time it was just her and I. It was fantastic. We had a lot of fun. I recommend that place for staying. If you're in town, there's cheaper options for sure. But if you just want to go walk it, I mean, it's almost like going to some of these, like garden places that you got to go pay money to see. Here you can just walk through it for free. So that's what's up recently. The other thing that's up is we have this not even 1-year-old toy poodle that's probably all of 10 or 12 inches tall. Well, she just came into heat for the first time in her life, and Axel, our Great Dane, is a fully intact male, and he has lost his mind. And it's actually really fascinating because he's too big to do anything, and he acts like he doesn't even know what he's supposed to do. So he's not trying to hump her or anything. He just has lost his mind. He will be pacing in his room at night, clawing at the door. He will not leave her alone. Big dog like that takes long naps throughout the day. The dude is taking no naps. I mean, it's just like whatever's triggering him right now is made him lose complete control. He can only think about one thing: where's Charlie? So it's a total shit show.
If you could only have sex once a year, I think it's
twice a year for dogs. But no, you're right. Okay, so. You are correct. It actually is much like
twice a year, yeah.
Like what you said. If this could only happen twice a year, but that's sort of what the reaction you would expect. It's insane.
Yeah. Well, I think it's funny that you have a dog the size of a horse and
That's pretty much what it is. It's just fascinating because normally when this would happen with a female dog and a male dog in the same household, you would actually have to keep them separated the entire time because, you would have puppies if not, and it might not be what you want. But in this case, we don't have to because he's not even trying to do anything. But even if he tried, he couldn't. The size difference is, right. And so they're together. So what you see is the impact that it has on his brain. And I'm telling you, I mean, he's around here drooling, barking. He's a completely different dog right now. Anyhow, enough about what's going on in the Lapp household. Austin, what you up to? I know you're up there living your little farmette, maybe doing some hunting, selling that real estate in that baby season. Anything else you got going?
Yeah, actually, I was thinking of the heat thing too, because we have male and female dogs, same breed, and larger breeds only go in heat once a year. sometimes twice.
Interesting.
We have large breeds, yeah. And so she went into heat last February, and he was just coming out of the puppy stage. He would not leave her side, never. Sit there and whine and whine and whine. Now, does he? Not to be gross,
I
but does he
haven't
clean up
noticed
after her?
that. We basically have to separate them. That is disgusting. I have not
Because they
noticed
will.
that.
It's disgusting.
Well,
It
while
was-
we're on the subject, we've got 2 dogs.
What? Are you serious? Oh my God.
Are you serious?
Yeah. So they're running around here with their little diapers on, and their diapers,
No way.
fall off a couple times.
So they make
day.
a dog diaper for this, Patrick? I wasn't aware.
So it's just,
Oh, wow.
oh yeah, yeah.
I didn't
Absolutely.
know.
We go through a lot of dog diapers. We have 2 dogs, 2 English Staffordshire Bull Terriers, and
Wow.
they're both in
Okay.
heat right now. So
Okay.
yeah, no males around.
Tis the
thankfully.
season. Austin, anything else you want to catch us up on? All right, Miller, what you got going on?
No.
Well, we're enjoying our little baby at the 5-month stage. Penny is 5 months old and is just growing like crazy. I am, 2 months ago, I quit my job, or I let my boss know that I'd be quitting my job in 3 months. So I've got a month of paychecks left, and I am working like a dog, getting this spun up, the Good King coaching program spun up, getting clients, doing webinars, doing teaching, doing training, and working to wrap up my day job in the next couple of weeks. So I am grinding like,
I'll bet.
well, like a
Are you
dog.
enjoying it though, Patrick?
So it's good.
Good. Awesome.
Yeah.
It'll be fun to follow along with that and hope it goes well. All right, here's a ridiculous question of the week. What do you guys think happens to us when we die? Miller? Your body's underground. It's obviously disintegrating, but there is a part of you that lives on. What happens with that?
I think we fall asleep and then we wake up, and we wake up kind of, you know how it felt like when you were a kid and, your dad carried you fell asleep in the car and your dad carried you into bed, and you woke up the next morning and, the sun's streaming in and there's bacon cooking downstairs and life is just cozy and everything is right. And I think it's like that.
So the
except
waking up would basically be the resurrection, the new heavens and the new earth. Okay.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So we, the dimension that we go into after we die time is not a factor. Time doesn't exist there. Time exists as a, product of our consciousness in this human experience. And when we transition out of this human experience, we're outside of time. And I think we'll be unified with the love consciousness that we all come from. And I think we'll wake up from that sleep and it'll be, held in the arms of love in this bright and beautiful world that has echoes of this one, but it's perfect and rich and beautiful and no sadness. And I am not in any hurry to die, but I don't fear it. And the kind of curious and open-minded part of me isn't really opposed to the idea. At some point, hopefully down.
All right. I like it. Austin, what do you think happens?
Well, I'm a spirit staring at you guys through these eyes. And I think what happens is I've heard before that it's like a hand coming out of a glove. My body's a glove. My hand is what's real. I die. My spirit just leaves. And the glove's there on the earth. And my spirit is what's the real me. And goes up to heaven. From there, I don't know. I mean, I hear that the things that we like down here, we're like in heaven. We're not necessarily a different person. So I think what would be really cool is if the conversation that you're having with the Lord, you just pick it right up in heaven. So as far as what actually happens, I don't know. That's what I hear. That's what I believe. I believe that I think our bodies mean a lot less than what we actually think. Although we're supposed to take care of them, they're a temple. I definitely agree with all that. But
I tend to disagree.
Yeah.
I think they probably matter more than what we think, personally.
Yeah, it's a topic for
Okay.
the future. I'll probably agree with that too. But Austin, so you die, your body's underground, your spirit goes to heaven. So would you be of the thinking that currently there is a heaven somewhere out there or somewhere up there, and then you go there, and so then are you thinking that the resurrection then, when all things are made new, like the second coming of the resurrection, is that at some point in the future then? And then what changes in heaven before that point and after that point? I'm just curious. In my opinion, there's no wrong answers here. I just thought it was a fun thing to spend a couple minutes on.
No. Yeah, and I guess I wasn't discounting our bodies for everything. I mean, because there's scripture to back up, like it's a temple and we're to take care of it. That, for sure, I believe in. I guess I was saying, like, I think that, what we invest into our spirits has a lot more impact than what we realize. And I'm not saying not to invest into your body, because if you don't invest into your body, you die sooner, then you can't invest into your spirit. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. You can't get fat and eat whatever you want. So I definitely, I go to the gym and try to eat healthy. But I think what happens is, and I don't know, I think that I like the idea of him building a house for me, And whether it happens, when I die right away, or is a new heaven and new earth, I don't know, but I like this idea of him building a house for me, Jesus building a house for me, and it's better than anything I could ever build down here on earth. Like, he knows me so well that he knows exactly how big I would want it to be, exactly what the finishes are, exactly what kind of kitchen and bathroom and layout. And so this, it says in scripture that this earth is a shadow of what's to come. So if you look at how real I am right now versus a shadow casting on the back wall behind me, there's a lot more depth and color and reality to me than what a shadow can actually bring. I don't know. It's just fun stuff I like to think about. I don't know.
That's a cool thought. I was thinking while you said that, Austin, we can see with our eyes 0.00035% of the electromagnetic spectrum. That's the portion of the light spectrum that we can see, which tells you that, there's the rest of it we can't see. So I tend to think that, because God is outside of time and because we can't see the vast majority of the light spectrum, that all probably exists right here, right now in
right.
dimensions that we can't see. So I don't really think of it as up there or, I kind of perceive it as right here and kind of merging with this reality in some kingdom of heaven fashion and kind of in a revelatory process. And kind of
so Austin, back to the heaven thing. So the thinking is, if you die, you're immediately up in heaven, and somewhere up there, out there is heaven, and maybe your mom is already in her house. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, maybe. I think that, I also do believe that what we do on earth carries over to heaven. So, I believe that I'm going to be running a business in heaven. I believe I'm going to be, I know that marriage isn't a thing, or not that we can see. But I do believe that there's, I don't quite know how to explain it. I just know I'm not going to be sitting on a cloud playing a harp. That to me, if this really is a shadow of what's to come, if this physical world and everything we do is a shape of what is in heaven,
sure,
and everything carries over somehow. I don't know how. I just feel that we are built to be progressive. In other words, we're progressive people. And I'm not talking politically. I'm talking about everything is unto something. Everything, it's what we do on earth, not just the souls we're bringing to the kingdom, all that stuff counts, yes. But what we're actually called to do here on earth somehow carries over to heaven.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know
cool.
how. I just know it does.
Yeah, I do too. I'm looking out the window here outside my office. There's a stone wall that my dad is building for our courtyard, and the stones come from the property, the 26 acres we live on. When I was a teenager, my brothers and dad and I picked them up off of the fields so that we could till the fields. Now those stones are being laid into a wall, and I know that Dad is building that in such a manner that our prayer is that it will be as beautiful and even more beautiful in 1,000 years than it is now. That's the approach that we're taking to the construction of this, in development of this property, and how that carries into heaven, I don't know, but I know that it's being done in love, and I trust that there will be some way that we enjoy aspects of that in the new earth. And I don't know if it'll be. I love your shadow language. I think that's a great analogy for helping us understand just how thin and how dark our perception is of it today versus what it will be.
Yep. All right. That was fun. Yeah, I think, what do I know? But it seems to me, my guess is there's no heaven out there right now. We die, we're asleep, whether we're asleep for 1 million years, 500 million years, or 1,000 years, or 100 years, whatever period that time is from the point that one dies until the resurrection, we're asleep. And like you said, Patrick, it's just like when you sleep 3 hours versus 10 hours, it all feels the same. And so it passes like that. And I do think your spirit is sort of, in a way, maybe possibly aware. And to the extent that it's aware, it is aware that it is safe and it is with Christ in a way and God. And it might even be aware potentially of others. I'm not sure. But in general, you sleep and then the resurrection. And then when that resurrection happens, earth becomes heaven. So that's my my thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, can I just ask go on a tiny little bunny trail on the side of that, Kent? So Donald Hoffman, who is a scientist, he talks about this idea that time, space, and matter is akin to a relatively low-resolution virtual reality headset that we wear as a means to interface with that which is real, ultimately real. And he would point to a unitive love consciousness that we would call God as being what is ultimately real. And time, space, and matter are a product of our consciousness. And he says he has the math to prove this, incidentally, which is a fascinating idea. But again, if you kind of merge that idea with the quantum theory observer effect, and I think we have to pay some attention to quantum theory because I think the patterns in the universe that God built into the universe are intelligible to a certain extent, and they're revelatory. We can discover more of them if we pay careful attention. And when it comes to quantum, for example, it's a very precise, very predictable. We're onto something there with quantum because it's precise enough to predict to the width of a human hair compared to the width of the United States of America. That's how precise our predictions are with quantum. So there's something going on there that seems to be connected to what is real and true. In quantum, there's an observer effect, which means that the outcome of what happens only happens when you observe it. And so Hoffman would say that when you fall asleep, your consciousness is asleep, and so the time, space, and matter that you perceive aren't arrayed in that way while you're sleeping. And then at the moment you wake up and you begin to perceive, then things that you're kind of like putting on the headset again, which and you could kind of play with that idea and think, well, what's behind my head right now, does that actually exist, or does it only exist if I turn around and look at it, right? And quantum would say that it only exists when you observe it. And, there's, I think, enough evidence that might be the case, that though we don't understand it, that's, probably true at some level. So, if we actually maybe cease to exist in the same way that we do now when we fall asleep, even just during the night, and then come to, kind of snap into formation, let's say, when you wake up. That's kind of a strange thing, but when you die, it's maybe just a more extreme version of that, and then your consciousness ascends in some way. I don't know. It's a fascinating.
Yeah, it is.
Fascinating ball.
And I also think that's where I don't have the great answers on, well, what do we actually mean by here being asleep? Because I actually would not be surprised if the spirits of those that have already died are sort of around us in some way. Yeah.
Oh, I believe that 100%. And when Jesus went on the Mount of Transfiguration with, was it Peter and James and John? I'm not sure who all it was, but Moses and Elijah showed up there with Jesus, and they were there. So whatever happened on the top of that mountain, they were outside of the time-space continuum, right? Because it was actually Moses and actually Elijah. So they just were chilling. And the disciples were so stoked about it, they wanted to build a house up there. It's like, stay there, which we tend to do when we experience the transcendent. But yeah, it's fascinating to consider that, how little we actually know of what time and space and matter in this life, what it is.
Agreed.
What it's not.
All right, that was fun. Let's move on. Okay, we are not going to talk about politics as much as we have. We haven't talked about it in every one of our 6 episodes here, but 1 or 2, and that is from it's a presidential election. It seemed like it was a pretty consequential one. Everyone's hearing about it. It's on people's minds, and we do talk about the American life. So here we are. The first one we're going to talk about here a little bit is, so Trump won, and why do we think that is? And I'm not sure that I would have put this on the docket tonight to talk about if it wasn't such a resounding win. But it does seem like there is something in the undercurrents of society here that wasn't being picked up on or being paid attention to, or maybe was being overlooked, and I think possibly at some times also being denigrated and pushed down and made to sort of feel like other than. And it seemed like the last election was some sort of a referendum on that, some sort of voice in that whole sphere. So I think because it was such a resounding win, I'm just curious, why do you guys think, first of all, let's talk about why do you guys think that Trump won such a decisive victory? Patrick, let's go you and then Austin.
I'm going to start with a observation that you probably didn't see coming, but I predicted that he would win in a landslide. Or I said it would be close enough that they wouldn't be able to cheat, because you can only cheat if it's within a certain margin. And I predicted that Trump would win outside of that margin. And the reason I said that is because of the evolutionary dynamics related to what I think of as our behavioral immune system. In addition to a biological immune system, if you go back several thousand years to tribal living, before our immune systems were attuned to or were exposed to other outside threats. If you grew up in your tribe and that's all you'd ever known and that's all it had ever been for generations, the tribe, 100 miles to your east or west may have diseases that would wipe out your tribe that they've become immune to. So if you ran into somebody from that tribe and you carried a bug back into your tribe, you could inadvertently wipe out your tribe. You could carry a disease that your tribe's not immune to. And so the baked deep into humanity is this kind of tendency to be a little bit afraid of people who are different from us. There's kind of we tend towards xenophobia because of that ancient threat. And that's why one of the reasons why Jesus's message was so revolutionary. He said to love the other. And it goes against our nature, which is to be afraid of the other. We have good reason to be afraid of the other, but Jesus had a revolutionary message in saying, no, love and be hospitable towards the other. So because that was certainly risky. I mean, you don't have to look very far to see examples of this. I mean, the European explorers came to, came to Mexico. The Spaniards came to what is now Mexico and just wiped them out with the diseases that they carried. So because of that deep, thousands and thousands of years old tendency in humanity, every time you have a pandemic of any kind, people always move to a more conservative viewpoint. People always get more conservative on the backside of a pandemic. And it's because the pandemic has activated that ancient immune system, that defense against the other. We put up, if you think about it, we all of a sudden we're more concerned about having stronger boundaries, which is a conservative viewpoint. And so I have predicted that because of that our culture would move to the right, like lurch to the right big time. And not just our culture, but the world would move to the right as it relates to having stronger boundaries. I think the pandemic was a blow to globalism ultimately, because we were moving in a direction where it was all about the tearing down of boundaries between nations, the tearing down of boundaries between people groups, and we thought that technology would bridge all of those gaps and that we had ascended beyond the need for those kinds of barriers. The pandemic reminded us at a subconscious, very deep level that is not the case, and everybody, had that fear of the other activated, whether or not they were conscious of it. That's why you see a resurgent nationalism in Europe. That's why you see Russia being more nationalistic. It was reasonable to predict that a kind of populist, nationalist, conservative voice here in America would absolutely win. And that is probably at a very deep level why he won. There's, a lot more interesting reasons that he won too, and I'll let Austin shed light on some of those. But I think that's at a biologic.
Fascinating. So you think
level,
that potentially it was a reaction to the pandemic, which if that was the case, do they not, if that was the case, is history, you would think that they would know that. You would think the left would know that, and then maybe would not have been so anxious to have that pandemic. Because I've never heard of this. I've never thought of it. But if you're saying there's a pattern of going more conservative after a pandemic, you would think the left in particular would be pretty careful that we don't have pandemics so we don't swing more conservative. Fascinating.
Yeah. I don't know if that's, if they just didn't think that far, or if they thought that they could, if they had enough hubris to think that they were more sophisticated than that. I don't know. But no, it's a pretty clear pattern in history.
Interesting. And Austin, what are your thoughts?
Predicted.
I was actually kind of stoked for this. First of all, I was dead wrong. I guess I just live in a blue state, see blue stuff everywhere. It just seems like everything's, democratic here. So you kind of get morphed by your perception of reality.
But actually, Austin, you do live in a blue state, but historically, we didn't necessarily live in a blue area, did we? But you were seeing a lot of Kamala stuff.
It's not, but the left has always been louder than the right. Like, I think making a brash statement, but that's how I feel.
Pretty true.
At least that's what I see. That's what I hear. So if you scream at someone loud enough for long enough, sometimes you can believe it. But couple thoughts I have thinking about it today. Bernie Sanders actually had an interesting statement to say, and he's Democrat. He said, and this is his thoughts post-election on the election. And I'm reading, quotes here. He said, "Here's the reality. The working class of this country is angry. They have reason to be angry, he said. We're living in an economy today where people on top are doing phenomenally well, while 60% of our people are living paycheck to paycheck. Then he goes on to say, it should come as no great surprise that a Democratic Party, which has abandoned working class people, would find that the working class has abandoned them. I thought that was really interesting, but more than that, what I've been thinking about, meditating on since this whole thing is, and part of it comes from a conversation that I had from a high schooler who goes to Penn Yan Academy. Again, keep in mind, yes, it's not necessarily blue county, but there is a lot more blue Kent than there was when you left. There's a lot more locally. Yeah. Even though that New York State was as close to flipping as it has been in a long time, we were 900,000 votes away from being red.
Less than a million votes in New York would have flipped Republican. State. That's crazy.
Yes.
It's not.
Which is a lot, but it's not when you think of the city.
I think wasn't it closer than that in New Jersey? It was less than 5% in New Jersey.
Probably.
I don't know what the numbers were, but yeah, it's wild.
So anyway, I was talking to, so you just assume after a while that everybody's blue, or other than the business owners or whatever, which, and I'm not heavily involved in politics, but I hear stuff. And so I was talking to a high schooler, and she said that she goes to the public school here and she likes Trump. She's too young to vote. It's really interesting. Here's a Gen Zer who, likes Trump. Why? So kind of talking it out at the gym. And she said that, all the students in the school, a lot of the students in the school like Trump. And a lot of the teachers like Kamala. And these are high school students. And I just got thinking about it, and Charlie Kirk's been going viral in all these kids' TikToks and whatever else, and he goes to colleges and debates with college kids on his viewpoints, and he's conservative, and it was just really interesting because I think what happened is there's something about, we'll say millennials, but definitely Gen Zers. They can smell the crap. They can see this. They can see the teleprompter, and they have this desire for authenticity. And not only do they have a desire for authenticity, they have a nose like a bloodhound smelling out the fake. And so I think that's my gut sense. And this is one conversation with one high schooler, but I think that's some of the case is that people are tired of the rhetoric and tired of the semantics, and they can see right through it. And while they may not agree with Trump's policies, you can't deny, he goes on Rogan for 3 hours, and so does Vance, and they're doing all these long-form podcasts, and they're seeing the real person. And the encouraging thing to me, and not to flip it spiritual, but I think we're teed up for revival. Because, again, the kids that can see the fake, they want the real thing, whether it's politics, people, or religion. They want the real thing. And that's what they're crying out for. That's what I think. So anyway, those are my
I totally agree with that.
thoughts.
I think that's actually maybe a bigger deal than what we're hearing about kind of in the narrative. Although I will say it's starting to creep into the narrative a little bit, Austin. What you're talking about is a thing. And I'm zero shocked that the teachers in that school were more excited about Kamala and the high schoolers in that school were more excited about Trump. That seems to be a thing, and I don't know if you might be able to lump the youngest millennials in with that, but there's a different generation that's in high school right now than the millennials for sure. There's no doubt about it.
There is.
Absolutely. We were down at Vanderbilt a couple of weeks ago to visit my son. His fraternity had a parents event, and so we got to hang out with some of his brothers there. And, it's an elite university, it's remarkably diverse. I mean, there's people from all over the world there, and I forget how many countries, almost all of them are represented there. But it's pretty, my son and his friends, the group of young men that he hangs out with, pretty conservative crowd. Like there's, they don't have a whole lot of room for, the soy boy crowd, as they call it.
That is interesting.
It's interesting. I mean, there's a big move.
I'm seeing pictures of a group of like 6 or 8 young ladies at a restaurant in Silicon Valley, all with MAGA hats on. A couple guys getting together in like some wealthy part of New York City, MAGA hats on. That you would least expect because it's liberal. Because what you started to expect was people wearing the MAGA hats in the less wealthy parts of New York City. That has been happening. But now it's creeping into the more sort of elitist, kind of liberal parts of these cities. So I don't think anyone needs to be worried about a total takeover here. I mean, these two parties are alive and well, and we could be swinging back and forth until the end of time. But I do think this election was fascinating because there was so much going against the outcome. You had all of legacy media, pretty much. You had the government agencies themselves, like the employees of the federal government. Most of these agencies were doing everything they could to not let Trump win. You had just direct, almost, no, I won't say nonstop, but you had a lot of just bold-faced lies coming from the leaders. It just seemed like everything was stacked against, and that to me was why I just sort of felt like this election was so consequential, because it kind of seemed like if Trump would have lost this one again, well, we already know like what was at stake. These people that are being flown in, getting shipped into swing states, and now they're trying to make them legal voting citizens ASAP. The censorship, complex, all these things. It was going to get worse, not better. So it just seemed like it was of consequence. But yeah, my thought on why did Trump win so decisively? Yes, you could talk about foreign policy. You could talk about the economy. You could talk about inflation, the price of food, gas. You could talk about the border. You could talk about censorship. You could talk about competency, all these things. But to sum it up, what I would probably say is that what we're witnessing is a return to normal, historical, mainstream American values. And I do think a lot of people felt like they were the last man standing, that everyone had moved on but me. And as it turns out, I guess most people felt this way. We were just being lied to, we were being gaslit, we're being fed a narrative that had a strong agenda to it. And I do think a lot of people were just feeling like, man, I don't really recognize this America, and I must be crazy because this isn't syncing with my thought process and my worldview as an American. But it seems to be what we're doing, and we seem to be moving forward with this new way. I don't get it. And I think as it turned out, a lot of people were maybe feeling that way, and it wasn't that the populace had moved on. It was that those in positions of power, especially including the legacy media, especially those in charge of information, the few in charge of information were cranking that information at us so fast and furious that we thought other people must have moved on with this new way also. And I think as it turned out, it wasn't that so many people had moved on with this. You're not crazy. We're all thinking this. And it's the people manipulating the information that are trying to get us to believe elsewhere, otherwise. That to me is what I would sort of pinpoint, as to what happened here. All right.
I agree. It's I saw a meme earlier today about the kind of hilarity of the fact that there's white women living in suburban America in a $750,000 house, driving a $100,000 SUV, and they think that they're kind of think that they've woken up in The Handmaid's Tale all of a sudden, like they're in some dystopian right-wing hellscape, and it's there's just kind of a dishonesty to it all, where it's like you're extraordinarily privileged. You live an extraordinarily privileged life, and there's not a single state in the country where anybody's can be prosecuted for something like a miscarriage, which there's the whole abortion thing. There was a lot of narrative spun up around that. There's whoever's driving that narrative successfully captured the fears of a certain demographic to make them think that it's all over now that Trump won. It's just it's right-wing dystopian hellscape, and it's almost funny how bizarre and how disconnected from reality it is. But I
agree with both of those things. I try to. I've sort of gotten to the point where I don't pay attention to those. I try not to pay attention to those things, particularly on X, where's mostly where I'm getting my information from. And even the crying people and the people cutting their hair and the people vowing to stop having sex. And I get it. It's out there or whatever. It's just, it's like noise, because what you said, it's kind of disconnected. And look, I think if Kamala would have won, there would have probably been some of that craziness coming from the right also. It would have probably manifested itself in different ways. But you do sort of have to feel sorry for that to be someone's genuine reaction. And look, if it's not their genuine reaction and they're doing it for clicks, Godspeed, go for it. We don't have to watch. But if they're doing it for that, hey, they have that right. But if they're serious, if that's really what they think, it is a little bit sad.
Yeah. Well, I think if they're abstaining from sex and doing all that stuff, I think they think it's pretty real. It's, I don't think they're just.
Yeah, no, you're probably right.
But I mean, the fact of the matter is that our apparatus for kind of making sense of reality and getting in touch with reality has been corrupted in a lot of ways. And there's big groups of people who just scarf up the narrative, and that's what it is, and that's what animates them. And so consequently, they've the last week under their desk drinking wine.
And let's talk about this new day in America now, because this segues into it. Because this is what I was thinking. I do think objectively there is a new day in America, and this was the outcome that I thought would be far better than the alternative. And so I will express my bias in that way. But objectively, it just seems to me like we are entering a new day in America. And you're right, not everyone feels that way, but I think most feel that way. And some may like it more than others. But I think even the people who are not the crazies, but this was not what they preferred, I think they can sense there's a new day in America. And I don't think they're totally opposed. Most of them are not totally opposed to it. But what was occurring to me is that there is I don't want to spend too much time talking about this delta or kind of the both sides of this, because it's a silly thing to both sides. But there is the delta between those that are super excited about the new day in America. Well, first of all, I've not been this engaged in politics ever before, but I've also never been this excited. And there's reasons for my excitement. I'll give them to you. But there are some that feel like this is the worst thing that could possibly happen. It's what we're talking about that's showing up. And I do think there's some common themes between the majority that senses there's a new day in America, and most of them being pretty excited about it, and a lot of them being thrilled about it, and the ones that are just totally opposed, think this is the worst thing ever. And what it occurs to me is the people that feel there's a new day in America are excited about it from my vantage point, I would say they tend to get, information it comes back to information. This is why I think it's so important that we have free speech in this country. And this is what everyone's been saying. If you want to have a democracy, you have to have free speech. Because when we really think about like what's at the root of a lot of stuff we're talking about, it's access to real information that is critical in a political system like we have in America. And so my mind goes there a lot. And what it occurs to me is those that are optimistic about the new day that's dawning in America tend to get their information from each other. I would lump Joe Rogan into that category. From independent journalists, I would lump like Michael Schellenberger, Glenn Greenwald, etc. And from the leader of the movement itself, Donald Trump. And it's the same three categories in reverse for the people that are most concerned about the direction that we're going in right now. And it seems to me they primarily get their information from the Democrat Party, not the leader of the Democrat Party, but the party at large. It's sort of a more holistic, integrated, cohesive, unified, we all say the same thing type of a situation. And so because you actually couldn't get that much information from Kamala herself, you had to sort of pay attention to what the other leaders in the party were saying. Whereas on the other side, you're just mostly getting the information from Trump himself. So it's the people that are not excited, in my opinion, and I'm curious to know what you guys think, if you think I'm wrong here, but they tend to get their information more from the party itself, the legacy media, and the elite middlemen. There's sort of a category that still exists on the left that's really going away very quickly on the right, which is it's not the Democrat Party or a political leader. It's not the legacy media, but there's like another layer in there where if you have the right credentials, you're not a journalist, but you kind of fall into you kind of take the orders and you can sort of have influence that way from sort of this elite kind of category. That really doesn't really exist that much on the right anymore. But to me, that's sort of how I would see the common themes of where people are getting their information. So, that just is what it is. And I do think that the many, I mean, numerically, there's still many that are not excited about the direction of this country, but as a percentage, most are. And let's talk about that. Patrick, the thing is that I've been tempering my optimism about what could happen here because I've been told all my life, politicians are going to politic and they say something and they get into office and then they don't do it, right? I mean, I've literally heard this my entire life. So I'm pretty mellow on my outlook here. But in our, maybe it was episode 4, maybe not 5, I forget, but you were talking about, maybe it was the one that Austin couldn't make it on, where you were talking about man, you can dream, can't you? What if this actually worked out? What direction could we be heading here? And that's what I'm starting to realize is actually leadership is very important because, and change actually could be made, and we could actually be entering a new day in America. That seems kind of surreal and kind of crazy to hear those words coming out of my mouth because it seems like it was not that long ago before we were sort of at the deepest part of the valley in the outlook on America here. And now it all of a sudden seems like, hey, a new day might be dawning and there might be a lot of improvements that can be made in actually a relatively short amount of time. So, what is this new day dawning in America that we're talking about? Well, I would say if we break it down into intangibles and tangibles, the intangibles, it's just leadership. It's just leadership. The only thing that's changed so far, there'll be other things that'll change. There'll be positions of the government that had required leadership that will no longer require that because possibly that entire governmental function may no longer exist, which could be great in some cases or maybe even a lot of cases, but they all exist today. The only thing that's changed so far is leadership. Not just the president, but it starts there, and then the president starts to make his appointments, and they start to make theirs. That's all leadership. The only thing that has changed so far is leadership, and yet it feels like a new day has dawned and is dawning, and that is the case. But that's the intangible. Like when we're talking about a new day in America, all we're really talking about here is the leadership has changed. And most people seem to think the new leadership is a better way forward. The tangibles, you're talking a day or two in, Hamas is calling for an end to the war. China is saying they want improved relations. The EU is saying they want to buy their oil from America instead of Russia. You know how big a deal that is? Just that one alone. Just that one is a big deal. Putin open to peace talks.
Yep.
Putin has been open to peace talks. They had peace talks 2 months into this war and ended it, except that the Biden people sent Boris Johnson in to blow that thing up. And then all they've been doing since has been blowing each other up. Putin, in his interview with Tucker, mentioned, and I thought this was very sad and one of the most insightful things that came out of that entire interview. Basically, Putin's comment was, who's he supposed to talk to? You guys switch out every 4 years. And he has a point. And that, I don't think, the thing we're not going to change is switching out every 4 years, of course. But the guy who happened to be in the office over the 4 years that we're having this trouble wasn't talking to Putin. That's a huge problem. He's been open to talks this entire time. They were doing talks. They blew it apart, and they haven't talked much since. So now he continues to be open to peace talks, and we're going to take him up on it. What else? Tangible. Trump and Elon are on a call with Zelensky. Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, and right now one of the most influential that's not in politics, is on a call with the president-elect Donald Trump with Zelensky on peace talks. Miller, this is crazy. This is something you're allowed to do? This is legal? You're saying that Trump can literally just get the man or woman on the phone with him who has the most chance of being an asset in that conversation and helping this freaking war end. And apparently, yes, you can do that. And no, it's not illegal. And so now we have Elon Musk, the Einstein of our generation, on a call with Trump and Zelensky trying to figure out a way to end this war. Elon set to lead Doge. RFK Jr. set to go ham on our health. Criminals set to be deported. Censorship seriously at risk. Like the censorship that's been going on is not going to be going on. There'll be plenty of it that's going to, I'm sure, continue, but to the extent that it was in the past, it really, the censorship complex has really taken a blow, and it started with Elon buying Twitter. So censorship at risk. Department of Education up for reform. Transparency and Well, that's my Sonos that just got turned on. They must have turned it on upstairs and not knowing it was connected down here. Transparency and accountability overlaid on our governmental entities. We could go on, and what are we, a week in? We're a week in. And so that's what I'm talking about in terms of tangibles of the new day in America.
Yeah, and you haven't even addressed really in depth. I mean, you mentioned the health thing, but shining a light on all of the areas, or even half of the areas that have been covered up over the years by the power structure. Like when you start shining a light, the cockroaches start running.
Transparency.
You're exactly right.
Yeah, it's only been a week. I mean, transparency alone, even if you didn't have accountability, well, you're going to get accountability from the American people if you have transparency. So transparency, if you kind of had to pick one between transparency and accountability, ideally you'd have both. But man, if you just had to pick one, you'd probably need to pick transparency with where our system is set up. Because in the very least, you can make change 4 years down the road, or whatever. And so that's painting the picture. That's giving some nuts and bolts on this new day in America that we're talking about. And I know we've talked about this on another episode, but I said nothing about Vivek Ramaswamy. I said nothing about Tulsi Gabbard. I mean, this is a stacked bench. Okay, there's tons of others. I mean, you've got influence from David Sachs now in this party. I mean, we could just go on, okay, but we won't. You get the picture. My question is, where do you guys think it goes from here? Are we going to have let's say it goes super well over the next 4 years. Is it going to be a fantastic 4 years? And then we do what we so often do in this country is we just swing back and forth, and, you know, the Republicans are in power. We have those 4 years, and then people want change for some reason, and so we swing back, and this whole thing lasts 4 years, or does it extend beyond? I, again, have had pretty tempered expectations in my optimism on this extending too long, but Chamath Palihapitiya from the All In podcast did say something on a recent episode, maybe it was the last episode, where he mentioned setting up the foundation now for potentially a 20-year trend, which, look, why can't it happen? Why can't it happen? Will it? I don't know. I really don't know. Like, I don't know what the future holds. I just don't feel like I have any sort of insight here or understanding if we're talking about 4 years of goodness, 8 years, 16 years, or 20. What do you guys think? Austin, I'll kick it to you to give your thoughts, then Patrick.
So, yeah, politics seems to be the highest of highs with the lowest of lows. And what is one person's highs is another person's lows. So, well, I would just love to see, I don't have a lot of thoughts on it, but I think that it's going to go well the next 4 years. But I honestly hope that the facts get displayed. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like that's what we've been missing for, I don't know how many years now, at least since 2016, where there was results in, 16 to 20, and they just weren't broadcast anywhere, or not that we could see. Like, if you went looking for them, yeah, you could find them, but I think that's what everyone's driven to, right? Is like, if there's results, like, you'll vote again the same way. If there's not, you won't change. Whether it's on a personal or a more global level, that's what I hope happens, is that regardless of what happens over the next 4 years, by the time the next election comes around, I want there to be actual statistics on, a lot of the things, mentioned, health and the economy, and things that we can actually look at and be like, okay, let's make an informed decision here, not we don't like this guy, we want to go the other way just because we don't like him. Like,
well,
and I guess
to your
that's all
point, Austin, and I'm curious, Patrick, what you think, but to your point, Austin, this did occur to me, which is that we could potentially be on our third Republican presidency since 2016 right now if COVID hadn't happened and 51 governmental agents hadn't gotten together and buried the Hunter Biden laptop story, which was apparently totally factual.
Yes.
And if they hadn't
that's what I'm talking
said
about.
Russia for 3 years about Trump. I mean, good grief. I thought Trump must have had something to do with Russia. I think most of us probably did. If those three things hadn't happened, I'm pretty sure we would have had Trump again in 20. And then if those two terms went really well, there is a chance we could be on our third presidential term from a Republican president. And so to your point, if this does go well, I guess, why wouldn't it continue? Patrick, what do you think?
Well, whenever there's a lurch to the right, there's always a risk of things going too far. And when the left seems to kind of desire a perpetual state of revolution, like there doesn't seem to be a utopia to kind of settle into. It's just always revolution, always pushing the Overton window to the left, to the left, to the left. Like just, it doesn't, gay rights isn't good enough. We need to add, transgender rights. We need to add, pedophilia rights. We need to add, bestiality rights. I'm extrapolating here, but you get my drift. It's just constant, like, push. And the tension that builds up in that can result in a kind of rebound to the right. And if you get the wrong leader in there, who is kind of that strong man on the right, maybe the Mussolini type who is skilled at making things, less chaotic, and all of a sudden all the power is centralized in that person's hands, and then that person can be a right-wing dictator. And I thought, in 2016 to 2020, I thought that there was about a 20 to 25% chance that Trump had that in him. I thought that there was a 75% chance that things would go well with Trump, and about a 25% chance that he would turn out to be a right-wing dictator. I don't think that that's the case anymore, and the reason I don't is because of the kinds of people that he's surrounded himself with. I don't think that he has the makeup to be a dictator because he's revealed that by surrounding himself with people like he has, the RFKs, the Tulsi Gabbards, the Elon, Vivek, et cetera. A dictatorial type of person wouldn't surround themselves with people who think differently than they do about important issues and who also have big profiles, people like Elon. Trump, I always was kind of critical of Trump because of his kind of ego. But, to his credit, if you've got a huge ego, you don't surround yourself with people who could outshine you, and certainly Elon could outshine Trump in some ways. So I think it kind of paints Trump in a pretty good light, the fact that he surrounded himself with that squad that he has. So I tend to think that things, you got Vance. Vance is the other member of this, squad, and he's redeemed himself quite nicely on the podcast circuit. I think his time on Rogan and Theo and some of the other podcasts, I thought he was really, really good on those shows. And I was kind of ambivalent about Vance before. I came away from those podcasts kind of liking him and thinking, he's well-spoken. He seems like a pretty normal human that you'd actually enjoy having a beer with. I think the chances of us having 12 years of right-wing leadership is pretty high. I think you go Trump and then you get Vance gets 2 terms. I think that's pretty much in the bag unless we really screw it up, unless they really screw it up. But I think if you combine that with the aforementioned rightward lurch post-pandemic, that probably moves more in generational terms. So I'm thinking probably more like 20 years than 12. But I do think it moved, and you do want it to move to a certain extent. You want it to be somewhat fluid, but I think it moves to the right, for probably 20 years. But I was concerned that the right would Trump. I still am somewhat critical of Trump's first term because it was so chaotic and he didn't have the experience necessary to really execute. But now he does, and he's also surrounded himself with the right people. So I'm much more optimistic. And also in the intervening 4 years, the bureaucratic deep state has revealed its nature to a much greater degree. It's become much more clear about what's going on. And I think there's just this unspoken desire for us people. I think we long to get connected to something that's real. And so when the left just keeps shoving the window to the left just over and over and over again, people just, the anxiety just keeps building. And it's like, wait a minute, you lied about that, and now we're not even going to talk about it? There's no recognition that you lied about it. It's just keep moving, just more revolution. And our nervous systems can't handle that. Like, we have to get grounded in what's real. People will cry out for that. And that's why people latch onto a right-wing dictator when they do. It's because it's like, well, look at what happened in the Weimar Republic in Germany in the 1930s when Hitler's rise to power came. They had the globalists had kind of pushed the envelope. There was this there was this progressive move. There was the hyperinflation. There was just chaos and there's just constant chaos on and on. It just got worse and worse to where people just kind of snapped into this like irrational, fear-driven, right-wing dictatorial frame. And when you push it into enough chaos, that's often it can snap back into that, dictatorial frame. And I was concerned about that. But I think what Trump's done insulates us from that to a large degree by surrounding himself with the people that he has. And I'm optimistic that, if we can we just dream about Elon doing to the federal government what he did to Twitter, which is fire 80% of them and have it work better than ever? It's like, that's the kind of dream that would make, to say that I would be elated if that would happen is to say nothing at all of it. And I do think 80% is the right number. I think if you lopped off 80% of the federal government tomorrow, we would all be better off in 2 years.
Yeah.
All of us.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that.
So
and I wouldn't even disagree with that number. But hey, yeah, I agree with all that. That's fascinating that you can swing. I hadn't known that about Germany, but that does make sense. This was something, speaking to what you're talking about with Trump surrounding himself with A players. I'm not sure who was making this point just in the last week, but it did make sense to me, is you can look and see a little bit of a theme here. We're now in basically the third generation, if you want to think about it like this, with a Democrat president selecting a vice president that in no means will push him or stretch him or compete with him. And so if you look at Obama's selection of Biden, my understanding is Obama did not think that Biden was particularly bright or the most competent politician ever, but he made sense as his pick and was non-threatening. Then Biden goes in office. Who does he pick? Kamala. Certainly not threatening. One of the least popular vice presidents we've had in our memory. Certainly not competition. And so then you get Kamala, who now takes a run at it. And who does she pick? Tim Walz. It's like, if every time a pick is made that's a little bit of a lower grade, then you wind up with Tim Walz. And I wish there was a better way to say it, but there's just not really. I mean, my guess is that Tim Walz will be forgotten in about 3 months. And 4 years from now, we won't even remember Tim Walz. Can you help me again? Oh, Kamala, that 100-day. Got it. VP. Yeah, I get it. And look, I could be wrong. I would not be surprised if he kind of fades away into oblivion, because not a good pick. Not a good pick. And I don't, just not a good pick. And I don't know if this is rumor, but I have seen it reported to some degree that Josh Shapiro might have actually declined the offer. I don't know if that is the case. I wouldn't be surprised either way. I wouldn't be surprised if he declined it, and I wouldn't be surprised if she did not extend the offer to him because she didn't want him outshining her, or possibly because of the Palestinian, vote that she was after.
Mm-hmm. Well, think about the progressive view on competence and masculinity over the last 100 years. Essentially, and I think this is one of the reasons that, the Gen Z males especially are way more conservative than prior generations. I would say, I think I read somewhere to the tune of 30%, 40%, have swung to the right more to a greater degree. And I think part of that is a reaction to growing up and being told that all of your masculine impulses to thrive and to excel and to go out into the world and go kill something and drag it home and feed your family and succeed, and your desire for competence and excellence, all of that was painted as just patriarchy and power striving and all of that. And that it's actually, the progressives would have you believe that it's all corrupt, that all of your desires for competency are nothing but a thinly veiled power urge that you have. And I think people just said, no, that's not that's not the way it works. And the funny kind of flip side to it is, if you reject competency as such, you end up with a bunch of incompetence. You end up with Tim Waltz types, but when you've destroyed the hierarchy on which our kind of entire value system is based, our ability to evaluate competence and evaluate excellence, and you call into question the fundamental values that undergird that whole framework, and if you just say that all of that is irrelevant and nothing but a power-hungry striving, well, then your side of the aisle turns out to be populated with nothing but a bunch of striving, incompetent nincompoops. And so, you're shooting yourself in the foot long term. And, I'm kind of thankful for it in a sense. Because, the only thing worse than an incompetent progressive is a competent one.
I see your point, but you're totally right about that. Elon, Joe Rogan, Chamath Palihapitiya, Tulsi Gabbard. That's not even getting started, dude. You look at most of the tech, a good chunk of the tech community, historically left, have come over for a lot of the reasons that you're talking about. Let's talk about the Amish for a second.
Yep.
So
right.
I married one, and I think the rest of us are like one generation away from being one. And so the Wall Street Apes on X reported that in 2020, 50,000 Amish registered to vote in Pennsylvania, and in 2024 it was 200,000. Four-fold increase. So
wait a minute.
When it really mattered and they felt like they could have some influence and their voice would be heard and could make a difference, they got out and dropped some votes in the box.
Yeah.
I don't have any particular... go for it, Austin.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm looking at stats now. So Donald Trump in PA got 3.5 million votes. Kamala Harris got 3.372. Yeah.
I've been under the impression
20,000.
that the Amish
No way.
in Pennsylvania.
If you're right about the 200K, you're right.
I think so.
You are right. You're right about that.
I
Because
think
this is a 130,
Really? And here's
140,000
what someone
difference
listening
here.
may not know
Yeah.
if they don't know the Amish like we do. Two things that we know. 100% fact. One, if they registered to vote, they voted. And two, 100% of them voted for Trump. Right? Those are two things that we know.
No doubt.
The Amish don't screw around. They're not going to register to vote, and then they had something going on that day. If they registered, they voted, and they all voted for Trump. So, guys,
Yep.
he won by 140,000 votes, and if the extra 150,000 Amish did not register, that registered in 20 and voted, then Trump may have lost Pennsylvania. So are we saying that the Amish may have won Pennsylvania? Let's just assume for a fact that's the case. That's crazy. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, well, and to whoever got Pennsylvania might have got, they played no small role in electing Trump.
That's exactly right. There was a lot of talking points leading up to it that whoever wins Pennsylvania is going to win the election. And then I don't know if that would have stood quite with all the other swing states that went Trump.
I think Trump had enough
But that was not likely.
Swing states that went Trump, but
There was, but that's 19. That's 19 electoral votes. Pennsylvania is a huge win every time. It's a very much. I don't know if it's the battleground state, but it's one of the top battleground states because of the amount of electoral votes you get from PA.
Yeah. And you know what the catalyst was for the Amish activation? It was the fact that Biden sent his DOJ goons after that Amos Miller, I think it's Amos Miller, the raw milk farmer, he came in there with guns drawn, black cars, SUVs rolling in there, with their M16s out, over some raw milk. I think the Amish just basically said,
yeah.
Fuck
well,
you,
isn't
man.
that the cool thing about the way our system is set up when it's functioning properly is you do something to us that we don't like, guess what? We will do something to you with our votes, and we'll get other leaders if you guys aren't going to treat us. That's how the system is supposed to work when it's functioning properly, but it does get gooey when there's propaganda and censorship and all this stuff. But anyhow, it's just, go for it, Austin.
One other thought, like related not to the Amish, but I was looking at maps today about how every state leaned. Like every single state leaned more to the right this time than previously. Like there was not one state that was more to the right.
Well, look at a map of the blue-red maps that you see. The red states, blue states map. Look at that at a county level. It turns out there are no blue states. There are only blue cities. There's no blue states. It's all blue cities.
But for those that may not know, for the Amish, their views on healthcare are going to lean more right. Their views on education are going to tend to lean more right. They're going to be more for small government, not big government. They are going to want as much freedom as they can possibly have. And they are actually very good stewards of that freedom because they don't actually use it to go kind of fuck around, or mess with other people. They kind of keep to themselves.
Right.
Their philosophy on family would tend to lean more to the right. They're just sort of more aligned in general, I guess, with the right, but they haven't always been that engaged politically. And when they felt like it mattered, they got after it.
Yeah. And what's fascinating, too, to think about how the overlay of how the military-industrial complex switched from the right to the left. You had Dick Cheney come out in support of Kamala, which tells you all about who butters whose bread. The military-industrial complex, which is once a constant state of warfare, said, well, we think the left is the best chance at getting that. And the Amish, they're non-resistant, they're peace-loving, and it's just really a sweet cherry on top in some sense, but also really fundamental at another level that the right is now more aligned with peace and prosperity and not the warfare. I think the George W. Bush alignment with the right and the military-industrial complex was part of what put the right wing on ice for a while, because I think there's a pushback to that too. The constant state of being the world's police and kind of, constantly going to war, constantly, needing to activate that side of our government. I think people are sick and tired of sending their sons and daughters, to some hellhole across the world to die for some cause that they don't believe in, and the right now is more aligned with.
That's exactly right.
Let's not.
And then
do
the
that.
Amish just aren't. You're exactly right. And the Amish just are not going to be down to be glorifying LGBTQ in the White House at Christmas parties, admirals switching genders. They don't have time for that stuff. And that just was so, that was just so like in your face, So
yeah. Biden's Secretary of Health. What was that dude or dudette's name? To look at a picture of that individual is to kind of look at a meme of where the culture has been. It's just hysterical. And then you look at, the potential Secretary of Health coming in, with Bobby Kennedy Jr., 70 some years old and cranking out push-ups like a real stud. It's just It's
Yep. We need more
Yeah, they pushed
TRT in
it
the
too
White
far.
House. I'm telling you right now, and Bobby Kennedy's on that
what
TRT.
was
So
coming.
let's get it, baby. Hey, to the last
On that
to wrap
juice.
this up here. I saw a post on X that made me want to just talk about this briefly. We don't have to spend too much time on it, but check this out. Isaiah Taylor on X tweeted, "Let it be noticed that once he decided that the race was existential, Elon basically just set up camp in PA and sat there until it flipped. This is how he does everything. Find the one lever that moves the world and then just go jump up and down relentlessly." And I love this because that is exactly what Elon did. And Elon does seem to have, his MO seems to be, what is the one thing that most needs to be fixed? And what is the lever for that thing? And he will just jump on that lever until it's fixed, and then he will go to the next thing. He did this with manufacturing. I think it was in 2019 when Tesla was on the ropes. And let it be said that there's going to be a generation that is hardly going to believe us when we tell them that for most of its existence up until the last few years, Tesla was on the ropes. I mean, they had all odds stacked against them, and not just the regular free market either, but short sellers were doing everything they can to make that company go under. And that was coming to a head, and manufacturing was a massive problem with Tesla, and he was sleeping in the warehouse. Not in the warehouse, in the manufacturing facility until he got that fixed. It does seem like that's how he rolls. What is the thing that needs to be fixed the most, that would have the most impact on everything else? And he will just hammer on that one thing until it's fixed. And I love this because it tracks with 3 of my personal business principles. Focus on what you can control. Know the 3 to 5 key levers to success. And there is only ever one thing that matters the most. I have some others that have sort of kind of made a list and then deleted some and added some over the. But those 3 have been pretty constant for a while now. And this also tracks with the basic premise of this book, The One Thing. I don't know if you guys have ever read this book, The One Thing. It's a fantastic book. I read it a while ago. I think I have it over here. But the basic premise of The One Thing book is simply a question: what's the one thing you can do such that by doing it, everything else becomes easier or unnecessary? So just this idea of focusing on one thing, the thing that needs to be focused on the most. Elon seems to be weirdly exceptional at it, and I wonder if it is maybe a pretty significant reason for the success that he's had. Austin, I'm just curious what your thoughts on that are on that, and then I'll kick it to you. Does that come naturally to you? Do you find it hard to do? How do you rank priorities? What do you think of this general concept of focusing on the thing that needs to be done the most?
Yeah. I like Ron Swanson in Parks and Rec. Never half-ass 2 things.
Is that a Ron Swanson
Whole-ass
quote?
One thing.
Is it really?
And yeah. Yeah. And I think of that all the time because my experience in business was, you were there in the beginning stages, just whatever you can do to get money in the door, because money in the door keeps the door open. After a while, it grows. It keeps growing. Next thing you know, you've got 3 different divisions, and it's all about energy, right? So I can take my energy and put it into 2 things or one thing that, I like it. It's making money. It's doing well for me. It's not profitable, but what's that going to do to the one thing that I like to do? It's going to take energy from that. So I'm going to have to kick that can down the road on the one thing I like to do. So then why not just sell it? So I've done that a couple times over the course of, owning and running a business. And I think of it all the time. Like, just told our church leadership team recently too, like, I like to do 1 to 2 things really well. And if I do that, and and I'm talking about giving up selling profitable parts of the business that were consistent income, that it was scary to do it both times. But every single time, like, the other part of it has grown. And I think it has to do with energy. And like, that's why I love that concept. I'm not that great at it. I mean, coaching is helping me with delegating. I'm slow to delegate. I could probably be faster. It's probably one of my weaknesses. But it comes with, just not being a control freak. But I think of that all the time. Never half-ass two things, whole-ass one thing.
That's the principle. Miller, what are your thoughts?
I'm so bad at this, and talking about this makes me cringe a little bit because I know how bad I am at it. And starting this business, the coaching business that I've started, and quitting my job has forced me to focus more than I ever have before. And I'm having to build the hardware and the software to do it, and it's brutal. Like I live in this kind of, I've never been stretched like this. And this year, the last couple of months have been some of the most challenging of my life. But there's also something really life-giving about it. I sense that it's true and good, and it needs to happen. So I hold it up as an ideal to strive for, and I recognize I'm way, way far off from it. I'm a very highly open kind of person. I'm always open for new experiences, and I'm vulnerable to the call of the novel. I love new experiences, and just locking down and focusing relentlessly on something is not a skill set that I had developed. So this is forcing me to do that, and it's uncomfortable as all get out. But
yeah.
I think
I notice that I will find satisfaction and fulfillment and maybe even justification in feeling productive or efficient, even if those things that I feel productive or efficient in are not really swinging the needle. And that is something I need to guard against a lot, because, what I would not feel good about is if 30% of my day was spent doing nothing. But suddenly I feel really good about my day if 30% of it I was doing things that didn't really need to matter, or that didn't really matter, but I was doing them really well. I was doing them really well. And now I feel great about my day, and I feel productive and efficient, and I feel fine. So that's what I need to guard against, is because I don't like not feeling good about myself. I do not like that at all. Like, if there's a day where I was not on point and not really productive, or kind of doing my work in an efficient manner, whether those things matter that much to success or not, I don't like that. But sometimes I need to really do a check with myself and say, yeah, you feel productive and efficient, but are all these things really moving the needle? And how much of these things are not really moving the needle? And you need to cut that out. That's the danger that I fall into, for sure. So I just think it's such a key element to success. It's such a key business principle that Elon seems to emulate super, super well. So I just want to take. Yeah.
I mean, I think people have talked about, is Elon autistic, or does he have Asperger's, and is he on the spectrum? And if he is, I think that's, how it manifests itself, his ability to just zone in on one thing and just stay locked in for whatever time it takes. And I'm maybe a little bit on the other end of the spectrum, and I need to move that direction in good ways. But it's fascinating. You said something that was kind of fascinating, which is that you don't like feeling, maybe in another way of saying it is, you're sensitive to when you're not being somebody that you can respect. And I became painfully aware of that a couple of years ago, that I'm not someone I respect, and for good reason. Like, my life didn't. The outcomes in my life across a number of different dimensions, my work habits, my financial results, my career, it didn't reveal itself as the outcome of someone who was conducting themselves in a way that I would look up to. And that's a brutal thing to come face to face with. And that's part of the thing that I help men with now in The Good King, is helping them become the kind of men that they can respect. And obviously, if you're hiding your porn habit from your wife and you're, jerking off in the shower, after looking at porn, it's like, well, of course you're not going to respect yourself, But, even, if you're scrolling Instagram instead of doing what needs to be done, same thing, right? And it's kind of fascinating because, you'd think, well, I'm in control of myself. I get to decide what I think about myself. And so I get to do what I want. As long as I'm paying the bills, it's like if I want to scroll on Instagram or if I want to look at the baddies, then, well, why couldn't I? But there's a truth underneath all of it that you can't really escape. Your central nervous system knows, there's something in you that knows that you're not being who you need to be. And it's a hell of a thing to come face to face with that, but it's, once you come face to face with it, I guess you can decide whether you're going to, turn around and confront that beast, or are you going to just numb the pain that comes with that realization and just keep on, drinking and smoking and doing whatever it is that you do to numb the pain and the pain of not being. Yeah,
exactly right. I mean, that's one of the things, Patrick, that I respect about you the most. And there's two parts to that. One is, well, there's three really. One is acknowledging it, seeing it to begin with. Second is admitting it to yourself, and that's a hard one, because of seeing it, a lot of times you kind of see it, but you can put it in a gray area. You can make yourself not really sure, and you can pretend you kind of see it, but you don't let yourself really. So being clear on it, and then but admitting it to yourself. And when you admit it to yourself, that's where you're really now open to change. And admitting something like that to yourself is, I think for a guy, that's really hard. And then you're going the third step, which, I think there's guys that do step 1 and 2, but step 3, which is where you're willing to talk about it, almost no one does that. And so to me, that speaks of, because we can all, at one level or another, we can all resonate with what you're saying. We all have parts of us that we are not proud of. And so when you see it, identify it, admit it to yourself, and then talk about it publicly, that's always been inspirational to me. And I hope it's inspirational to others too, because that's just better than drifting away. And I think maybe our generation saw some, or maybe a lot, unfortunately, of our parents' generation where that was true, but they never wanted to really see it. They definitely never admitted it to themselves, and they certainly never talked about it. And sometimes you can maybe sense it in someone. You can maybe pick up on it a little bit. And that's really sad, because that is how you can waste your potential, and it's how you can waste a pretty sizable chunk of your life too.
Yeah, and the challenge is, and this is a universal part of the human experience, and our second oldest story that we know of, which is the story of Cain and Abel, is a story about that dynamic, where when you see that you're not being everything that you could be, you see that you're not sacrificing properly, and you see someone else who is, you see your older brother who is sacrificing properly, you can either surrender to that and allow yourself to go through the painful process of becoming the older brother, or you can resent the fact that your older brother is succeeding, and you can put off facing your own demons by destroying the ideal that's in front of you and putting your older brother in the dirt, killing him, tearing down that ideal. And that is a human tendency. I think that's a human I think the reason that that's the second oldest story we know is because it's a universal human dynamic. And we all know that about ourselves, and we all know that when we see it in ourselves. We know that when we see it in someone else. You know when you run into someone who hasn't gone up to the edge of the abyss and stared into that reality. You know it when you are with someone who has. There's a kind of glory and a weightiness to the person who has confronted that hell and has become the one who sacrifices properly and in order to bring forth the best. And, going back to the political conversation, I think back in the 1800s when Karl Marx was someone who kind of intellectualized Cain and made Cain's spirit and made that the ideal, put that forward as the proper way. Let's tear down the ideal, bring everybody down into the mud so that no one rises up. And so I think when you see Marxist revolutions happen throughout history, you see the spirit of Cain writ large being enacted. And we all know that spirit is in us. I came face to face with the spirit of Cain in a profound way about 5 or 6 years ago. It was soon after I had confessed my sins to my wife and confronted, the darkest parts of myself. And I was reading about Cain and Abel in Genesis, and the Holy Spirit just stunned me by revealing to me that I was Cain. And I remember I was on my porch in Franklin, Tennessee, and I saw my neighbor drive by in his brand new Porsche 911 Turbo, which is my dream car. And I couldn't pay my bills. And I had just confessed to my wife that I'd spent the last 2 decades, diddling away our future by pursuing sexual escapades and other, pleasures of the moment, let's say. And when I saw my neighbor go, it's like we live in the same neighborhood. We're hypothetically from the same socioeconomic class. And here he was driving, and I just looked at that, and there was kind of an anger and there's a resentment that rose up in me. It's like, why? Why him and not me? And the Holy Spirit just literally struck me down. I fell to the ground when it came over me. It's like, you are Cain. And I was like, fuck, I am Cain. And it's like, what are you going to do with that realization? At that moment, everybody has a choice. You're either going to confess and face the fact that you're Cain and then turn towards God and say, it's all yours, anything you want. Or you can say, I refuse to have that shining example in front of me, and I'm going to destroy it. I'm going to murder that and bring that ideal down into the dirt so that I don't have to be confronted by it. And that's Marxism writ large as a belief system, and it's the spirit that animates a large part of the Marxist kind of thought process that we see, emerge on the progressive left. I think that's an extreme thing to say, but I think it's true, and I think it's irrefutable. And I think I'm qualified to say that because I've confessed that was me and confronted that part of me. And there may still be a part of me that's that way, but I'm on an ongoing basis willing to enter the fires of sacrifice to burn that part away. And that has been one of the most painful and transformative journeys of my life, but absolutely necessary.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that, and thank you for being so open with your learnings and your journey, because I know for a fact it's helping other people, because I know it has helped my wife and I. So keep moving forward.
Awesome.
Keep sharing and keep helping people.
Thank you. Yeah.
Let's wrap it up. If someone wants in on that, Patrick, where
Yeah.
can they go? And then Austin, anything you want to plug before we wrap this up?
Yeah, check out my website at goodking.life or connect with me on Instagram at goodking.life. Be happy to hear from you.
And I think I am
good.
good too. Hey, I don't think you guys even subscribe to our own YouTube channel yet, so please frickin' subscribe. I think, Lee, how is anyone else supposed to subscribe
Yeah,
to
we'll do
YouTube
that.
if you guys won't even subscribe? I think we have like 4 subscribers, so someone go be our 5th subscriber on YouTube.
I'll do it.
All right, everybody.
I'm on it.
I'm on it.
Metal
Yes.
and Forge.
Metal and Forge.
Mettle. Metal and
Yep.
Forge on YouTube.
It's hard to
Spotify.
find on YouTube actually because, it's a new channel and we only have a few videos and they're getting like 3 views each. And so, I'm not even sure people can. Okay, good.
I got
All
it.
right, good.
Easy
All right.
peasy,
Yep.
man.
Do that. Subscribe on YouTube,
Subscribe.
mettleandforge.com. We welcome your feedback. And that's going to be it.